Welcome, traders. In this video, we're going to go over a couple of things that I have discovered using the ZoneTraderPro tools, and I think you will be very interested in them. The first thing that we're going to look at is the use of the ZoneTraderPro divergence indicator on the SPY. And what makes this really interesting is just how accurate the indicator is. The second thing we're going to look at is a BloodHound template that I've gone and created that leads to some very excellent guidance as to which way you should be during the day, whether that be long or short. And we're also going to take a look at how we use both of these together. So first, let's look at the SPY. On the SPY, which is the Spider's stock traded index, what we are going to be looking for is this. We want to see if we're going to be going long an accumulation signal in most cases. If we're going to be going short, what we want to see is a special divergence. And special divergence is, of course, the divergence that we get from trading from a low to a high. Same thing here, from a low to a high. Now, what is interesting about this setup is that we don't see very many false signals. And I've been personally trading this for the past 2 weeks. And the biggest problem that I had trading it was if I was in a trade, such as if I had shorted back here and I was given the accumulation signal here, and I was maybe like 1 or 2 ticks from getting filled, suddenly price went higher and I was wondering why I hadn't hit the close button on the trade. It is more unusual that we see special divergences for a long signal, such as we do right here. And it is also pretty unusual that we see a distribution divergence as a short signal. Now, what's interesting again about this is that where we get into this pattern of first a long, then a short, then a long, then a short, well, one of the things that is interesting is that each of these trades on the ES is good for somewhere between 2, 3, and even 4 points. However, if we were to look at this, for example, we would also want to take into account what was happening on the ES. We'll get into that a little bit later. What was happening on the ES is we just wanted to be long, and I'll show you why on the ES chart. Okay, the trades I'm going to go over are the trades from today, which was Thursday, July 30th. And we'll start back here at the open. And you can see that we had an accumulation long right here. And at the same time, we also had a special divergence on the ES chart itself. And that was good for a little over 8 points. Now, normally I wouldn't suggest taking this from up here, because one of the rules that I created was that I don't want to see the length of the special divergence be very long. In other words, price moved from about 321.58 all the way up to 322.41, so well over an 80-cent move in the SPY. But I went ahead and circled it. As you can see on the BloodHound chart, when we got up here, the BloodHound chart went red. And that would have been a trade that I would have been approving of, only because we have the combination of both the BloodHound signal and the SPY signal. Now, the other thing that I want you to understand is I am not interested at all when we have this divergence signal here, which is just standard divergence. So we're going to completely ignore standard divergence. So here's an example of standard divergence down here. And the reason that it's in blue is because that was a trade that became non-divergent. So nothing ever disappears from a ZoneTraderPro chart. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping the non-divergent ones on the chart. Again, I'm not interested in regular divergences, and I'm not usually interested in any type of special divergence where we've had this long extended price swing. So the next trade down here, we have a accumulation long, and we see that was good for about 4 points for itself. And then we traded into this short trade here. Now, again, whether or not you take this accumulation long would be up to you. But look at what the BloodHound chart is telling us. The BloodHound chart is telling us that we're red. Now, what's also interesting about this too is that even though I don't have the actual patterns on this chart, what the pattern is saying is that this is a broken reversal short trade from right here. And that would be another reason to actually avoid this trade and take that 5-point trade right there. But they both work out. Then we come down, and from here, we again have a long trade, works out for another 5 points. Again, you're trading against all of this red that we're seeing in the BloodHound template. And when we got up to the test the high, we did have divergence. Now, of course, the only reason that this divergence is dark blue is because we actually traded one tick higher than the previous high, and so that makes that no longer a divergence. But if we notice our ratio numbers here, our ratio numbers more than quadrupled from just an 8 to a 35, and that is something I look for in that type of distribution pattern. The next trade that we have is this distribution pattern here, and again we see that our ratio has gone from 35 to 50. We have distribution divergence and we have spider divergence. Now, as we traded down, we see that we were given the opportunity to add to that position, and we see again the benefit of having this BloodHound template here, which can literally just keep us in this trade. Just an amazing trade for well over 17, 18 points. But that's not over yet. We're now in a strong trend as defined by the ZoneTraderPro patterns. In a strong trend, we reverse to the minor area of resistance. And as soon as we reverse to the minor area of resistance, what do you know? We have 3 more short signals, and we have a trade good for almost 9 points there. So very, very good set of trades, and we're only about 30 minutes after the open. After that, we see this reversal pattern right here. Now, if we look at this, this is a reversal pattern on the spiders, and if you were going to take a trade, this would be the area to do it because it's an exhaustion pattern, which is a reversal pattern, and that's exactly what happened. Now, taking it from here would have been risky because, as you can see on the BloodHound template is still painting red. So I can understand why we would end up kind of passing on that trade. And again, with this one right here. However, both of these trades ended up working, and they basically fit the definition of what a reversal is. In each one of these trades, here's the exhaustion pattern, here's the strong trend pattern here for price to continue to go higher. And at the end of the day, that was almost a 10-point move higher. And you could have done that with very little risk of maybe a point or two. The next thing we have on the chart is this special divergence short trade. Now I didn't circle that again because of the price move here. It was almost $1. So that is something that I would not be interested in. And we had no bloodhound confirmation on the other side. But now if we look at the trade over here, again, what do we have? We want to use all our tools together, and this pattern right here is the broken reversal pattern. And after about a point of confirmation, bloodhound gives us a green signal, and that's good for almost 8 points. So we're using all of the tools together and not just a divergence on the spider chart, but we're using the patterns and we're using this bloodhound chart right here. We next have a little area of consolidation right here. And what you're seeing on the spider chart is basically what happens during a consolidation. And that is basically you have a fight between buyers and the sellers. So I can understand taking this trade right here. If you did, that was still good for 4 points. And if you shorted it, you would have shorted here when the bloodhound gave you the red signal and the spider distribution, and that took us down another 7 points until we had the special divergence down here, and we stayed in that trade. And again, we can use the bloodhound template to give us an idea of where to pull the trade if we didn't have a set target, as once it gets down into here, when we see that the bloodhound criteria is no longer telling us we should be short. Next trade we have here is an accumulation long trade. Again, good for about 5 points. Now, what is interesting here, again, if we look at the spider chart, again, because price tested the exact low, that's why we lost the accumulation and it went non-divergent. However, knowing that and knowing that we were green inside of here, that could have led to a long trade, which would have been worth well over 12 points. I didn't mark the short trade here, even though that was good for almost 4 points, because look at what the bloodhound template was telling us. It was telling us we should be long. So that probably wouldn't be a good idea to trade against the bloodhound template in favor of the spider divergence. That's kind of important there. In looking at the bloodhound template, we had the bloodhound template go red here. And again, what we want to take into account for is that what the pattern was over on this chart. In this pattern, we're in a strong trend. Now, you did have the spider regular divergence up here, but again, that's not a reason to trade until and unless I get some kind of confirmation in the bloodhound, and then the bloodhound signal takes us almost 7 points lower. At this point here, we have another short signal. If we didn't take it from back here, we have a legitimate short signal right there, which was good for something like 7 points. The next long signal we have is from right here, and that would be an excellent signal to have taken, because as you can see, the bloodhound is now painting green from back here. We have a little pullback, and we have our accumulation signal. Our next accumulation signal is here. Our next accumulation signal is here after a small pullback, and that trade was good for almost like 9 points. Our next long signal is actually from here, and this is where reading the spider chart becomes really important. Now, if we're over here on this chart, we only have a very small pullback, and we don't even have the zones painting over here yet. So taking a long trade from here would be a little bit on the dangerous side. But what I would note is, what did we get? We got a special divergence right here, and while we're not going to take that as a trade, I would definitely consider that as a warning. And then this would actually be a legitimate short trade from there. And as you can see, that would take us down into the accumulation long trade from right there, quite a few points. We then have, again, a short pattern here, followed by a long accumulation. Again, if you did take it short, that was still good for 2 or 3 points, but you have to be aware that if you did short this here, you want to be really aware of the accumulation on the other side and be out of that trade, and give the respect to the accumulation signal and determine whether or not you want to be out of that trade. Because as you can see from right here, this accumulation signal led to a significant long trade here. So now we're back to this trade that these series of trades that I highlighted at the beginning of the video. And what is really kind of the hard part to trade is when we're in this kind of consolidation area, because we're being given conflicting signals. And if you did short there, well, you covered somewhere down in here, which is good for 4 points. And then you played this back and forth game. But the way I would be reading this is, I would be reading the spider and seeing that over here, once we have this trade, what's happening is we now have a higher low, we now have a higher high, we now have a higher low. And we didn't have any sort of red going on with a bloodhound signal here. So we could have traded this successfully for several points, probably 6 or 7. And then once we were given the green signal in here and avoiding this short signal there because the bloodhound template was green, then this would have been a much clearer long signal. Now, here's an accumulation signal, accumulation long signal that we would have gotten in this area right here. And again, this is why this idea is just so powerful. Look at what happened on the bloodhound chart right before we got our accumulation long signal. And we have the bloodhound chart going red. And then we have it becoming non-divergent right here. Even if you did take it though here and you got out of the trade here, we're talking about 1.5, 2 points of a loss. So again, we have a really reliable indicator about when we should be in and out of a trade. We then see that we come down here, we've got a legitimate short signal that's good for 3 or 4 more points to the short side. And then look at what happens. We again get this reversal signal and we take that long. What are we doing here? We're making higher highs and higher lows in this series of patterns right here. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not fully aware that I am getting these special divergence short trades here. Again, each one of those is still good for a couple points. I'm aware of that, and that's going to lead to this larger trade right here that was good for almost 4 points. You're going to have to develop your own strategy on how you want to use something like this. Our KP2 indicator is a measurement of distribution and resistance. So as we can see, when the indicator flips here, what happens is price goes higher. We go from a low of 18, which is really a meaningless number, to a high of approximately 109, 108, and that is a significant number. Okay, so as I was making yesterday's video, I lost my power, and I'm just going to pick it up from here from Friday morning. Okay, we see this from Friday morning at the open. We have a sell signal here. However, the BloodHound template is solid green. So if we did take it, it would be a little bit higher risk and much more of a scalp. And then we had a buy signal here, which got us another couple points. But then we started entering a quite significant sell-off. And we have a very good trade there for 4 points, followed by an additional excellent trade there with distribution divergence for another 4 points. And what's key about this trade is that remember what pattern we are in over here. We've entered a strong trend. We see the reversal to minor. This is exactly where we'd expect to see a trade start at, and that's good for 5.5 points from there. From there, we did have a buy signal here that became non-divergent at the very last second, which actually did work and worked pretty nicely actually. And then as we came up to here and the BloodHound signal went green, we got this overextended special divergence signal here that was basically about 60 cents. And at this point, I don't really have advice because that is larger than I would like to see for this. As you can see though, the trade did work out very well. At least if you waited to enter the trade to here, when we know that the signals are changing and they're no longer all green, that could be a low risk entry point, and with your stop just very simply just about a point higher. So that would be a little bit of an idea how we would trade that. Now, here's kind of an interesting setup going in at about 9:53. And we see over here, we've got several signals starting off with a short signal. And if you ever talk to me on the phone, I've always said this, that I've said that order flow isn't the most important thing. It's what these numbers with the ratios and the divergences are telling us. So we see that we had a short signal there, followed by a second short signal there, and this long signal here. So you're wondering, which is it that you believe or you trade? Well, if you hit the reverse button each time, you did make money, and then you eventually made the 4.5 points of profit. However, what I would remind you is that here we have a failed trend trade right here, and we are in a reversal pattern. So being that we are in a reversal pattern, and then at the reversal pattern, the BloodHound template goes red, that would basically be the way that I personally would stay. I would stay short. So what I would look at is the BloodHound template telling me that I should be short, and that if anything, because of the long signal from here, I'm just going to tighten up my stop. Then we have a good successful trade here. And then at this point here, you see we have another long buy signal, good for about 4.5 points. We trade higher, and as we trade higher, the BloodHound template gives us a red signal, and then we have a special divergence sell signal that, as you can see, worked out really well. And then again, what do we have? We're back into our patterns. Here is our trend trade. And as you can see on the left, with our trend trade, we have bearish divergence. Now this is where it gets really interesting. There's our first entry. There's our second entry. There's our third entry. Now down here, right as the BloodHound template turns red again, we do have a buy signal. And that would be completely legitimate if you wanted to take profits at that point. Don't have a problem with that. That probably would be a great idea. Then again, we focus back on our patterns. We're back into a strong trend pattern. What happens in a strong trend pattern? We reverse to minor. And what do you know? We get our bearish divergence signal again, and that trade is good for well over 10 points. Looks like 11.5 points. You have one final sell signal here on the bottom, and then price reverses. Look at what we have up here at 1024. We have distribution divergence, and we have regular divergence on the SPY chart. I'm not usually going to give any weight or heavy credibility to just a straight divergence signal here, but when it comes with distribution divergence over here, I do like that. So that, again, that would be good for another 4.5 point trade. Then we trade into a support zone where we have a buy signal, and we again get about a 4-point trade out of that. And then we trade into another distribution signal with a sell signal, and we get another 4 points out of that. So the morning on a whole, that's just the first hour. If we are using our patterns with the BloodHound template and with what is occurring on the SPY, has already been extremely profitable with no losses in that first hour. As we continue to look forward, here we have a regular divergence on the ES with a special divergence on the SPY. That's good for another 5 points. We have accumulation divergence here. Now we probably got the signal here with our buy signal. If we stayed with it, we were able to get that trade. If not, I understand why after about 2 or 3 points, if you pulled it off the table, I probably would too. And then re-entered down here, again with just very small risk going down to here. And what I'd like to point out is one of the keys to whether or not a trade is going to work is what is happening down here with the KP2. So this is what's most important to me. We see as price rises, the KP2 indicator rises. That means that market orders are driving this indicator higher, and that's what we want to see. As it fell back down, that's also what we want to see, because what is happening is from this point to this point, limit orders resistance is coming in, and these limit orders, it's not really resistance, I'm sorry, it's limit order support is coming in, and that's again exactly what I want to see if I want to take this trade. Same exact thing for right here. As price comes down, we see the V, and there we go. Same exact thing here, same exact thing here. Actually, when in this case, we see the ratio come down, that's expected, that's market order selling. And then as price comes up and does a little double top up here, we see that there was significant limit order resistance right here. And again, that's exactly what I want to see if I want to be short in taking this distribution trade. So again, just using all the tools together is basically what we're looking at. Again, here we have distribution divergence and we have double divergence on the spider chart. We get 4 points out of that, and you're being told to cover with this long signal right here. Again, we get another 4 points out of that trade. We had an accumulation buy signal right here. However, there was no spider buy. Now I'm taking this back, and this will be the last couple examples I want to show. I want to show what happens when we get into a strong trend. So here we had a couple of buy signals here, and this one entered a strong trend, took us all the way up to here. And again, this is why I say that we don't want to get involved with any kind of special divergence when we're in a strong trend. However, I noticed a pattern that when we do get this very long special divergence here, in this case it was well over $1, something like $1.40 in the spiders, I noticed that the next trade right here is the one calling the high. And that's when we get our 4 or 5 point pullback. And again, we get a second sell signal here. Here's another example of that idea. We've gone from a strong trend support area all the way down here, and we've traded again over $1 higher. We get our buy signal right there. That's good for about 3 or 4 more points. But then up here at the top, we get our distribution divergence signal, and then that takes us down over 10 points. So be aware that one of the rules that I've created for myself that you should probably consider is that once we've gone probably about 50 or 60 cents in one direction in the spiders, it's probably completely useless to try to short this all the way up. Here we've gone from a strong trend support into intermediate resistance. If that trend trade doesn't hold, then we're in a strong trend reversal, and you're probably wasting your money trying to short this anywhere in here. What's best to do is wait for that second confirmation signal that we get here. Now, some of you are probably wondering about the BloodHound template. The BloodHound template is going to be available for any BloodHound customer. However, there's going to be a small charge for it because this is going to be put into a black box, and there are programming fees involved with that. So it is what I consider a very valuable template because we don't see a lot of false turning signals, and when combined with the spider divergence, the two of them work excellent together. So that'll be out probably sometime in the next week or two. I am doing a Shark webinar in the next week, so when I edit the video, I will be placing the date and time right here, and I will be announcing the availability of the BloodHound template at that time. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.